I hear you say it comes down to human behavior. We can't control it. And we do know that people are going to act stupid. People are going to get an email that says, this BU bank, please send you number. And they're going to send it. Some people are. Or they'll get a text. Is there anything that the security community, other than say, oh, we'll educate them, they don't listen. I mean, the ones that you want to reach, the ones that you could reach, they've already been reached. They're in this room. They read PCMag. It's the ones that just have no idea. Is there anything that any of you, that your companies can do to protect the people who won't listen?
I mean, I think we've got empirical evidence that there are some things that you can do that actually work.
Okay.
Because we've got iOS devices that typically aren't affected by malware, right? I think you start to fail as soon as you start to make this a user decision. When you've made it a decision to, am I going to install this application or not based on these permissions that it's requesting, and you push that security decision down to the user because you can't take it at the App Store, then you're in a position where you've already failed. That situation is just not going to work. With iOS devices, because everything is mandatory inside the same sandbox, and it's all prevented, like you can't have an application on iOS that starts to read your SMSs unless you've jailbroken the device and taken steps as a user to turn off the security protections that Apple provided. So definitely yes, I think there's plenty of things that vendors and carriers and handset vendors can do, but you have to actually take the hard step of creating a system that has those steps in place.
Yeah, I'm going to go one step, well actually, like 4 or 5 steps above that.
Super.
And talk about a little bit more from a customer education standpoint. Gary and I both sit on the board of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. So you may have heard of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is coming up in October. Did you know that? Did you know that?
Yeah, we're aware.
All right. Gary knew it. Very good. So he and I, both our companies, Bank of America and McAfee, have partnered with the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And the primary premise of that organization is to educate the American public on how to be online safely, right? So we're looking at what can we do as a company, what can McAfee do as a company to continue to educate on basic things. Like, okay, you get that email that looks like phishing. Well, it looks like your bank, looks like Bank of America, but you know what, there's misspellings in it. Don't click on the link, right? I mean, it's basic things that you're exactly right, that we're finding we have to educate even our customers on what to do and what not to do. Now it's even moving into, like on the SMS channel, so smishing. So you get a malicious SMS, right? Hey, we're not going to send you an SMS that says, hey, you need to call us because we've detected something. Click on this link, we'll give you the phone number. You know, there's just some basic things where it's just education we have to work towards as
That's a valid point. You know, as much as we would love to think that there's something that we could do to safeguard against the most basic of human error, you just can't. You can't
That's right.
engineer things to the point where if you do that, they're not going to be able to do anything, right? So it's a catch-22. On the one hand, you just stop everything that they want to do, or do you try as hard as you can to do things like this and educate and drive the awareness to say, you know, let's tell you what you need to do to be as safe as you can be, right? Renato made up a good point. You know, make sure you turn all your antennas off that you aren't using, right? It's going to save battery, and it's going to save you from getting something bad from happening, right? There are all sorts of things that you can do that are really simple. That again, you know, I don't think we can back off the education element, because I think ultimately that's going to be the thing that people respond to.
I think I've heard the expression, if you make something idiot-proof, the world will bring you a better idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to address one thing, and you know, as a carrier, you know, it's all good and well for Apple to do that and to regulate and to basically take away choices for the customer. We can't do that as a carrier. You know, number one, we're a different industry. We're heavily regulated. If we do anything that takes away choice, we're basically, you know, there's not just in the public side, but also regulators. And on top of that, you know, we're in the business of giving the customer as much as they can handle. So unfortunately, we can't take the step to do those kind of things that you know, you were talking about. We have to be very careful and be mindful of their privacy and their you know, basically their rights. Apple can do that because they're basically electronics, you know, consumer electronics company, software company, whatever you want to put them in, they can do that, and that's the arrangement that the universe has with them. We're unfortunately a different market. We can't. So we that's why we've taken an approach of doing things on a network and giving things on a device.
Right. So when I define the problem on Android, it's two parts, right? There's loose control of the App Store, and then there's the Android patching situation. Here's a fact. Every single piece of malware that's ever been able to jailbreak an Android phone has used a vulnerability that was known to the public for many, many months before it was used for that attack, right? So if you deploy a device if you give a device to a customer that is up to date, that is patched, and that is not affected by those flaws, they're not going to have the data on that mobile device compromised by that piece of malware.
But you're talking about jailbreak rooting, which means the customer had to download an application.
No, I'm talking about a piece of malware, like a malicious app that uses one of those jailbreaks.
They had to download that app, and many of the times they know that they're actually jailbreaking.
No, I mean the malware is using a jailbreak to take over the phone. So that means it's an application the user has unknowingly installed, or that may have changed behavior after they installed it. And then it's using some exploit to take over the phone, and it's exploiting a vulnerability that was known to the public for many months that was not patched because carriers and because handset vendors don't issue patches for those devices.
I would beg to differ. Samsung just 2 days ago there was a big patch. There was a big operating system issue. They issued a patch within a day and a half.
So, I mean, how do you explain the Android 4.0 devices? We've got 20% in the wild. Right?
And just to clarify, this Samsung thing, in case you hadn't heard, this was huge. If you visit a website with the particular exploit on it, you don't have to do a thing. Just open it up. Your phone is wiped. So it's a little bit significant, and they did have a patch in a couple of days. I would love to know how many Samsung phones have received that patch. I'm guessing it's like this.
Yeah, so there's a difference there. I mean, that kind of attack is scary, but it's not being used by malware.
True.
So we're kind of chasing these threats that actually don't have a huge risk to us. The ones that do matter are the ones that are in the malware, and those are the bugs that aren't getting the attention and they're not getting patches.
Got it. Dan, do we have time for another question, or do we need to go to...
We do have time for another question, but it's going to be my question.
Oh.
So
there we have it.
There's a reason why I have a mic. So there's the panel is just, I mean, I don't want to break the panel. We could do this all night. We've got more time, but we've got a couple of things I want to do. We want to give you a chance to ask some questions, so I want to leave some time for that. I also want to, we're going to have a raffle with some pretty fantastic prizes. And by fantastic, I mean Ultrabooks and all-in-one desktops. So I wasn't kidding. See, you doubted me. And also, I want to leave us a little bit of time to grab a drink and socialize in the bar and talk about this panel after the Q&A. So my question, and we came up in the pre-call, I just want to ask about NFC, near-field communication. In terms of mobile payments, if you listen to a lot of websites, this is the key to unlocking the mobile payment revolution. I think it's a little bit overrated and possibly unnecessary. But Keith, you're actually designing these technologies, so I want to know what you think about it. Is it necessary? And what are you guys working on? And then I promise to give the mic to whoever else has a question.
Well, I think NFC as the key to mobile payments is a lot overrated, not just a little bit. We've been testing all different sorts of platforms and capabilities. Literally, just this week, we went live with a test in Charlotte, of which I happen to be part of the pilot. Surprise, surprise. Where we're using like QR code technology, right? Just like your Starbucks app. If you get the Starbucks app, you go in, you pay, they scan it. We're testing the same type of capability within our own mobile banking app. So you go to your normal retailer, you want to pay for it. They've got a scanner, which who doesn't have a scanner these days? And you can say, I want it to come out of this checking account or this credit card account. You scan it, you're done, right? Because our premise is it has to be easier than pulling out your wallet and swiping your card, right? But there's lots of capabilities. NFC, some of the limitations there is, you've got to have the closeness. I don't know what the word, but proximity. That's the right word. Thanks, Gary. It's the proximity of the phone to the reader, right? Well, those of us in the security world, we're kind of freaked out about, hey, making that wide open. So we make it like 3 millimeters. So from a usability perspective, you gotta touch it, right? So and there's a lot of issues when you get down to having to have that level of closeness, or proximity. So we think there are other opportunities that are sitting out there that are baked into the phone itself, and even using the screen as a reader and a capability versus having to have a hardware device. Because every phone's got a screen, but not every phone's got an NFC.
Can I just one comment on that? I think there's a lot of talk about NFC in the context of financial transactions, but what people are missing, and what I haven't heard in the media, is that NFC is not just for that. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at, things like door readers. We had launched this home security not too long ago. Tying into that, tying into with the auto industry, with opening your car. There's a lot of advantages to it, and it opens up a whole new universe once you have that in there. I think once you have those in the devices and prolific, I think you'll start seeing a lot other uses for it that will make it a much more rich value.
So it might have been more of a value package if the iPhone 5 had actually come with NFC.
Yeah,
I'm not going to comment on that.
I think we're all mum there.
I think at the end of the day, they sold a lot of phones, so I don't think it had anything to do with it.
From an attacker's perspective, I think everybody's probably expecting me to tear NFC to shreds. But in terms of these kinds of attacks, I call it close access, proximity attacks, right? You guys are all really familiar with an attack or one of the ways that I try and think about this, and one of the ways that everybody's really familiar with attacks that require close access are credit card skimmers, right? It's a very similar kind of deployment scenario for an attacker where I have a very cheap piece of hardware, everybody's got a debit card or a credit card, and if I gain access to that card for even a second, then I can get that data off. From an attacker's perspective, NFC is not exactly the same, and it's going to have really big trouble scaling on an attacker's side because the hardware is not there yet. It's still too expensive, and it's difficult to use, requires some expertise. And we talked about the iPhone 5 does not have NFC. Everybody has a credit card. How many people in here have a phone that has NFC? And how many that have one that's on right now, right? So the available population of people to compromise from an NFC perspective is actually quite low. So it's simply not as attractive as an attack vector as a malicious app would be, where you've got 400 million people on one app store. So that's kind of the way that I think about NFC from an attacker's perspective.
The great thing with NFC, you can get free subway rides.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Well, maybe I'll abuse that.
Those are excellent points. So who else? I know we've got a lot of questions out here. Who else has got?
Wow. Okay.
Thank you. I kind of agree with Dan about targets of opportunity, and particularly on the consumer side, that they'll be primarily ad hoc and perhaps primarily about issues of privacy rather than money. But I think we haven't talked a lot about the level of controls associated with the BYO movement in corporate America. And I've been to a lot of these seminars held by the likes of Fishnet, for example, talking about solutions associated with BYO. When you combine that with a poorly curated app vector like Android, it's easy to get to a compounding problem. I'm just curious, you guys are obviously have heavy consumer responsibilities, but what about the BYO issue in your own companies?
Well, thankfully, I don't own that. However, I'm a part of that. And as we thought about how do we allow the use of a personal device to have corporate email on it, right? Well, or to have your home PC have access to the corporate network, right? Well, it all gets around how do you build a bubble so that it doesn't matter what's on the machine. I was talking to somebody earlier. We're almost in some ways going back to the green screen days, right? It doesn't matter. It's a dumb terminal at the end. You got a screen. But hey, you're going to connect to that network then that can display what's sitting on the network. So we've got one of the other things that I use at home is I connect to our corporate network. It's called a virtual desktop. It looks just like the desktop on my PC at work, but it's a virtualized view of that. So it has nothing to do with what's at the end. It has everything to do with what's sitting on the server, and I just connect to it just like a terminal.
I'd like to comment on that because it's been one of the things that I get asked a lot, and I think it's the most misunderstood and overused idea other than cloud computing. I think number one, when BYOD first came out, I think the conversation was misunderstood. I don't think people were saying, I want to bring my own device. I think they were saying, I want to bring this hot new iPhone that I just bought. I want to be able to use it at work. But now the corporations are buying iPhones and they're becoming much more prevalent. I think that you're going to see that it's not really about bring your own device. It's bring the best, the hottest new device to the corporate setting. I think that's really what people were saying all along. And I think people are going to eventually find that out.
They want their employers to buy the phone.
Exactly, because at the end of the day,
Me
when
too.
you think about the restrictions,
Neil does as well, by the way.
when you think about the restrictions and functionality that you lose by bringing your own device and then putting it in a corporate environment, I think that's when people are going to say, wait a minute, that's not what I meant.
Well,
Right?
a corporation has the same incentives. They want you to buy their device, right?
Yeah, it's a battle. Okay, we
Well,
got another question. We got a.
Just one more thing about that. The thing that I also find very amazing is that people try to fit BYOD into the environment without even having a complete mobile strategy. And I think that's where there's all this disconnect, is that the companies have to have a mobile strategy that incorporates BYOD. Ask the very basic question, are you even going to allow it? I mean, I think a lot of times people just assume that it's fait accompli when they really should think about it and just say, no, we'll get you the phone that you want.
Here we go.
I had a question on that. I've actually got we'll take this one next, and I'll get to you next.
Sorry, this one's more for Renato. So as a carrier, Android's the most heavily targeted platform out there right now. As a carrier, do you have the ability to provide higher access to an antivirus client? And what are the pros and cons of doing that, and why wouldn't you allow that? Because at this point, basically, AV products are handcuffed, essentially. We're just another app running on the phone.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because actually we just, as I mentioned in the beginning, we just launched a free anti-malware client, which is McAfee, and we did in fact give it more permissions, and we did in fact do things like to make sure that the battery usage is very low, CPU utilization is low, make sure that the data transmission back to with all the downloads and everything are taken care of for the customer, and that's free. So we did, in fact, work very closely with antivirus. I mean, we can't work with everyone, and we can't give that access to all the antivirus.
Well, your AV client, does he have root access to your phone to make an internal firewall?
But we're, I don't want to talk about things.
There are certain,
VR guy in the background.
I think that was a no comment.
You could see it. I'll tell you.
Say that we are taping this.
Yes.
We got a question in the back.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, so my question was tied to the first gentleman over here, which was really to the concept of bring your own device, and that was my initial question as well. And my thoughts around your answers were one of, isn't a lot of the enterprises looking at the concept of bring your own device more of a reduction of a company asset and pushing that out to the user base, whereby they're providing X number of dollars to have the user buy it instead, and that doesn't just reduce the cost of the device itself, but also reduces, more importantly, the cost of support for that device ongoing, whether it's a laptop, a phone, a USB, whatever that might be. So having said that, and having expanded about what he's talking about, from a carrier standpoint, I wanted to direct this question at yourself. I'm a very proud Verizon user for 13 years, so don't take this incorrectly. But what is the thought process from the carrier standpoint in addressing potentially the next two steps? One, from an enterprise side, allowing client technology to be resided on your premise someplace or tied to your device or to your software. That allows an enterprise then to link back in to then take care of the things we talked about on the panel, pushing out some of the McAfee technology that protects that device, number one. Number two, remote destruct potentially, or three, managing what can be downloaded or what cannot be downloaded. And then secondly, potentially, as a user community in a whole, those users that want to come in and don't understand the technology, because you're talking about things that the average mom and pop that have a cell phone, if I buy my parents a phone, they'll have no clue when they click on something if they won the Australian lottery or whatever they won. So they don't know how to make those decisions. So a user can pick one of those profiles and protect themselves.
I think we need a question.
Let me. I think there's a couple. You did have a couple of questions there. Let me first answer, and I want to answer in two different ways. One is from a Verizon Wireless perspective, we want to make sure that we're bringing the right security both on the network and on the device. And there's other things that we're only talking about the app, but we do a great. I think we have a very good story of what we do on the device side. We do a lot of testing. Every single device gets tested before it goes out. We do over 140 different checks to make sure that device, and I know you talked about some vulnerabilities are in there, but we make sure that before that device goes out, that those things are unexploitable and it's with a certain parameter. We make sure that that the devices that we put out there are the best devices out there. And we also make sure that with the network being secure, I think that we bring a good security proposition that bring your own device makes it a lot simpler idea that if it's a Verizon phone, that's what I'm trying to get at, right? That's my job every day to make sure that for that, that housewife, that executive, everyone has a secure platform to begin with that can feel comfortable with Verizon Wireless, that if I'm going to take it to the work, the employer should say, okay, so it's Verizon Wireless. They do a lot for security. Okay, we'll let you use that device.
Thank you for coming out. It was a great summit. You were a great crowd. And thanks to our panel for very informative discussion. And a special thanks to our sponsor, McAfee, of course, for making this all happen.